What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 12 of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. And if you can't tell from the massive smiles on both of our faces, we really enjoyed this story. And if you have done what Amy tells you to do every week and actually read the story before watching this video, you almost definitely did too. Even if this was the first story that you read from Shadows over Innistrad, if you have even passable knowledge of the cards of the story, you had to enjoy this story.
Heck, even if you've never read a story before and know absolutely nothing about magic, the dialogue, the writing style, just everything about it is just amazing.
It's true. The descriptions, the as you said, I loved the dialogue, I love the interactions.
If you're just a fan of stuff that's good, you're going to like this story.
Yeah, it was really, really, really good. It's definitive now. We speculated on it for the past 2 weeks, but it is definitively the final story in the Shadows over Innistrad storyline. It says the Shadows over Innistrad story will be back in 2 weeks, so there will be 2 weeks of no stories, at least from the current storyline, but they'll be back, and presumably that'll lead into the setup for Eldritch Moon, since we did...
I'm not really sure how they'll format that exactly, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it'll be like, it'll start off as just a continuation of Shadows over Innistrad, and then it'll turn into part 1 of Eldritch Moon later on, or something like that.
But that's weird that there's going to be, like, those auxiliary stories almost. I don't know, like, where they're going to put those exactly. Like, are they going to tack them on the end of the same
it won't.
Shadows over Innistrad was? Are they just going to make it the beginning of Eldritch Moon? Like, I'm not really...
Oh, you mean the ones that aren't associated with Eldritch Moon at all? The ones that the filler ones?
Shadow over Innistrad finishing stories, I guess.
Oh, so, okay. I thought you meant the 2 that are coming in between End of Shadows Over, because for the next 2 weeks they're still having stories going up, but they're about other random things in the multiverse that may not necessarily be so random. The last time they did it, it was regarding some of the Commander sets that were being released, but they don't have a supplemental product that is coming out soon, which is what they did with Commander set. So we'll see what those stories are. Maybe we'll do a quick brief jar about them. I don't know that we're going to go as in depth. But we might do it just because it's part of the story, and maybe we'll talk about some other magic things as well that are going on in the community. Who knows? Because it is Joe and Amy Review, it's not Joe and Amy Review the magic story, so we may very well branch off into doing other types of review, but
we'll see. That's
really neither here nor there for this. For this, we're here to talk about I Am Avacyn, which was this story.
Or, if you guys like, you could leave in the comments what you think we should do for the next couple of weeks before the Shadows over Innistrad stories return.
Should we talk about those stories? Should we briefly talk about them, talk about other things? You can also let us know on Facebook and Twitter. If you guys have been paying attention, the logo down below probably looks different to you if you've seen our other videos. The titles may look different, so this is new and improved. We will, there should have been a little notification, I believe it would be over here, letting you know to go check out that video. So please do so. It'll give you a heads up on what we're doing with our channel. But again, that's not part of this. I will do my obligatory negative first so that we can get it out of the way, because this story was fantastic. I will say that, once again, same as last time, same as the last multiple times that I've mentioned, we didn't get anything on Arlen Cord. We kind of didn't get anything on Sigarda. We didn't get anything whatsoever on Olivia Mobilized for War. So these characters, or those cards, were put in this set.
Or the Gitrog.
We had the Gitrog monster. What are you talking about? The Gitrog monster was in that whole... He had a whole story.
Yeah, but I'm talking about in this story.
Oh, I'm not talking about in this story. I'm talking about overall.
I want more from the Gitrog.
I'm pretty sure you're not getting that. You're lucky you got what you got. And that was a pretty cool story. You can't say that it wasn't. Okay. So, we didn't get those things. at least as of this story, which is seemingly the end of the Shadows over Innistrad story, we reached the 5th and final story point.
Well, they're going to come back with Shadows over Innistrad, not Eldritch Moon, so we'll see what that
right, and we can
entails.
see the fallout. We can see what the rumbling was at the end. Is it what everybody thinks, which is Emrakul coming out of the ground, and she is in the earth, or she is in the moon, or
hey, there's claws scratching through the marble or something, right?
They talked about claws and scratching and marble many times in this episode, so if I missed that, it's totally possible.
It's the werewolf.
I wouldn't think so, but it's totally possible.
Your lover girl, Arlen Cord, will be in it.
I would hope so. You know what I found interesting? They talked about the angels. But what they didn't talk about, the angels from Always Watching, the angels that were on Always Watching, kind of coming down and attacking Soren for Avacyn, or under the control of Avacyn. They didn't talk about Bruna and the other angel whose name I'm not going to remember, who were the other two angels, Sigarda's sister angels, who had gone crazy because of Avacyn, or were influenced by Avacyn. Sigarda was the only one that wasn't. And Sigarda kind of realized that her two sisters had gone crazy, and that Avacyn had gone crazy, but we didn't see those two in this fight with Soren. Now, maybe it's because they weren't there, Avacyn didn't have a chance to call upon them, but will they play a part? Will the new versions of Bruna and the other one whose name I can't remember, sorry everyone, it was I think,
leave it in the comments.
I think it was 11 episodes ago that we talked about her, so, but
that's a lot.
it was, I'm pretty sure it was episode 2, because episode 1 was the two hunters, and episode 2 was,
I think you're right.
Was when we saw the angels.
2 or 3.
Regardless, it was a long time ago
Yeah.
at this point. So, anyway, maybe we will see, because we saw Sigarda's new card in this set, maybe we'll see new Bruna and a new version of that other angel in the next set. Who knows? Why was Olivia mobilized for war in this set? I have my reasons, which if you've seen our other videos, for why I think Arlen Cord was in this set, despite the fact that she was talked about very briefly one time, and it's because if the transform mechanic doesn't come back in Eldritch Moon, then it makes perfect sense that you have her in this set to show off the transform mechanic. It makes perfect sense. Olivia mobilized for war, she didn't transform. Her effect isn't even, if I remember correctly, not necessarily even keyword based, where you could say, menace or something like that isn't coming back in Eldritch Moon, so it makes sense, or whatever. I don't see it. Maybe again.
And she didn't have madness.
I don't think so. Maybe she enabled it. I really don't remember. She was not that memorable of a card, unfortunately.
Maybe the cards that have madness need to be in this set,
right?
Not Eldritch Moon.
Right. And that's why madness enabling, meaning causing you to discard cards, so that you can play your cards for madness.
But that would be that would just be the same mechanic under a different name if they couldn't have madness.
Which they did.
They've had that before, obviously, before they had madness.
And including in this set itself, they had cards that had morbid but didn't have the keyword morbid on it. Like, morbid was if a creature died this turn, some additional effect would happen when you played the card.
Oh.
If you played the card, something would happen, but if something died this turn, something else would happen, and that was called morbid. But if there's a card in this set that says, if a creature died this turn, X also happens, and
and it just didn't.
It just doesn't say morbid on it. So there are functional reprints. That's a thing. Anyway, so
let's get to the actual story.
Right. So briefly, that was my problem with this story, as it has been for the past 4 weeks, is that it didn't give us what I was hoping, which is you made mythics. You made mythics that were named characters. Am I upset that Startled Awake was not in some way featured, or Seasons Past, or Behold the Beyond? No. Because those aren't named legendary creatures. Those are events, or Startled Awake, there's technically a kid. Like, that could have been happening elsewhere on Innistrad, and it makes perfect sense that things like that would be happening on Innistrad. I'm not upset that I didn't see those. I'm upset that I didn't hear more about Arlen Cord, that I didn't hear more about Olivia, that I didn't hear more about Sigarda.
There was such a build-up to Arlen Cord in the beginning. you know, before the set actually released.
Yeah.
They were like, Island Cord, Island Cord, Island Cord.
Yeah.
Everybody loves her.
Yeah.
And then.
Well, and she was
Why?
a new planeswalker. Every other planeswalker in this set was a planeswalker that we had technically seen before.
Yeah.
I do not know offhand if Nahiri had ever been released in a standard legal set. It may have all been in supplemental materials or you know, enhancement materials.
Well,
but regardless, she was a named character
She was
who
a
we'd seen
planeswalker.
before, who we knew. Arlen Cord was entirely new, and they gave us nothing on her. Anyway, I'm beating a dead horse. I've talked about it way too much. So we will move on. Hopefully we see her in Eldritch Moon. My guess is, as I've said, Tamiyo and Liliana will be two of, if not the only two, planeswalkers in that set. It will be a smaller set since that's the formula that they're going with, is large set followed by small for the 2-block structure, or the 2-set block structure, excuse me. So
hopefully we'll see her, the brother and sister duo.
Gisa and Geralf. Gisa and Geralf.
Yeah, I really want to see him again. I think he's cool, and I'd like to see how he in some way interacts with Liliana.
Well, and
that
in
turns out to be a thing.
In our games episode, we talked about, with the rest of our, you know, Geek for All group, we talked about Gisa and Geralf and our guesses for what's to come in the future, because Gisa is working with Nahiri, and she is also a necromancer. So will she come up against Liliana? Will the two of them feud in some way? Especially because Liliana was an actual ex
One of many.
to Geralf.
Well, I'm sure Geralf hasn't had that many actors, let's be real. But Liliana has.
So that Liliana was an ex to Geralf, and that makes Gisa jealous. And so that could be a thing. Two feuding necromancers, they're feuding over Geralf because of Geralf. So who knows? We'll see. This story, I guess the reason I'm dancing around talking about it is because I don't know what I can say. It was so good.
Just incredible.
It was, every part of it was good. I loved the fact that Avacyn's madness came through in the fact that when she looked at Tamiyo and when she looked at Jace, she was seeing them so drastically differently than they really were. You know, Jace had like bugs or something coming out of his mouth when he talked, and she called them fiends. At one point she said Jace was holding his head, but she said his claw was on his face, like, because she sees his hands as claws. She called them fiends throughout, which if you said that someone or something was a fiend, I wouldn't necessarily think that you see them as a fiend, but because of the rest of her descriptions of like leeches coming out of their mouths and stuff like that, like it was
like
it
Soren's leech mouth.
it was so
So
vivid.
funny.
It was it was so vivid, and the words and the dialogue and the vocabulary that was used painted such a picture in your mind. And there were so many times, I mean, there were other times in other stories, especially with Nahiri and stuff like that, where Amy would look at me during the story and go, that's badass. You know, like that thing that just happened was badass. Today, Amy looked at me about 8 or 9 times, was like, that's badass, that's amazing, that's so cool. And
at one point I just went, huh? What? And I like ran over so I could like look at the story, because I was sitting on opposite sides of the table as he was reading it.
Yeah.
And you know, doing something else as I was listening. And at one point I got up, made that noise, and just looked at the words. Yeah. Because I was just in awe. Yeah. Usually Amy gets up to come and look at the pictures. This time she came up to look at the words and see how they were, you know, and I had told her, because reading it or seeing it was pretty important this time around, just because of the fact, ironically, that the word see was used so frequently. You know, Avacyn would say, I can see these fiends, meaning Jace and Tamiyo, and the word see was in italics. And then when she saw Soren, she said, I can see him, in italics. But then when he actually said those faded words of, I am your creator, and she seemed to snap to it a little bit, she came to slightly, and she stopped seeing
all the warped nonsense with him, and she saw him for who he really was, and she knew that he was her creator, and she saw him for who he truly was. And then when she said, "I see him," there were no italics. The word "see" was not in italics anymore, because it was not the warped version of "I see." You know, Avacyn thought that she was seeing the true forms of Jace and Tamio, who were hiding themselves, who were outsiders from another world, who were coming here to be threats to the plane. And so she was gonna
really monsters disguised as humans.
Yes.
Is that how she put it?
I think, like, yeah, either disguised as humans or like in the bodies of humans or whatever. And awesome. Just so cool, which shows more of her madness. I did love the fact that, if you remember from, I believe, episode 2, when we heard about Avacyn, the fact that I made it akin to Bruce Almighty, where when he took over the powers of God, he could like hear all the prayers, and if he ignored them, they kind of buffeted him after a while, and so he had to do something about it. It was the same way with Avacyn, where she heard all of their prayers to her, and if they were intense enough, she would know that it was something that she needed to handle and come help with. And when Soren said to her, "I am your creator," she said that it felt internal. It felt like those words were inside of her, and that it seems like, you know, the common trope, at least in sci-fi and or fantasy, where a phrase will unlock a sleeper agent or something like that, you know, awaken it in them.
I thought of attack dogs.
Right. Yeah, that you use that phrase and that takes them from happy-go-lucky dog to mauling your face.
Like Winter Soldier.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and so so you got to see that. And you got to see Avacyn's reaction to hearing those words, and she said that it felt like thousands of innocents praying, that she, you know, prayers that would go unanswered.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So cool.
Amazing. And that's, if you didn't listen to Amy and you didn't read the story, what I just said, if you think that sounds cool, that was one of like 30 different awesome lines that were said in the story. So
what I'll say is pause this video and then open that in a new tab and read the story.
I will also say, and not relating to that, do what she said if you haven't read it yet. Go do that. If you're still with us or if you've come back, what I will also say is we have talked a couple of times about the length of some of these stories. They have been long. The first story was very long, or at least felt very long, because they were introducing new characters.
Yeah.
So you needed to take the time to analyze who each person was, what they were doing, what their purpose was, and try
to figure out how they fit into the world
and try to make sure that you remembered them.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, this is so-and-so. That's going to be important later. Let me remember that.
Right.
This time, there were only 4 names that were talked about. Soren, Avacyn, Jace, and Tamio, and even then, for most of it, they were fiends.
Which made it kind of akin to the Oath of the Gatewatch stories.
Yep.
Because if you think about it, in the beginning, there's all of these characters doing all of these actions, and then in the end, you kind of narrow it down to the main characters.
But in Oath of the Gatewatch, you narrowed it down to the 4 main characters in the 4 Oath Planeswalkers, but you also had the 2, you know, Ulamog and Kozilek. So it technically was 6. This time, Avacyn was there, and she was one of the 4.
Yeah.
So, you know, I agree with you. But now it's even less, and yet this story, possibly, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, this may have been the longest one yet.
Yeah.
And I will say, I thought it was very interesting how Avacyn was killed. Following Anguished Unmaking, the thing that, if you've been watching all these episodes, we have been talking about since episode almost 1, maybe 2 or 3. But I am sure have mentioned it way too many times. And I apologize for that, but I felt that it was necessary to talk about because it was a spoiler for us. Because when we came into this story, if I didn't know that Anguished Unmaking was a card, I would think that Soren might have saved her when he said, "I am your creator."
Or I would have probably thought that maybe Tamio would try to, team up with Soren, and they'd somehow figure out a way to, dissipate the madness and keep her alive.
Now, that may seem like a hypocritical statement, at least for me, because I also appreciate the fact that, and I've said on this channel, I'm pretty sure it's recorded up there somewhere, that I appreciate the fact that the 5 main story points are being put to cards. And it's because the example I always use is the Theros block story. In Journey into Nyx, the 3rd set, when Elspeth is killed, I did not know that Elspeth died because I was not reading the stories and it was not in a card. Technically, the Hall of Triumph or the Hall of Champions or whatever it was, that card was supposed to depict the fact that she was dead and it was in memorial to her. It didn't really say that. And so
and if anyone deserves a memorial,
it was Elspeth.
Elspeth.
So, but there was no way that I knew that. And so at the time I was like, that's annoying. Why won't you tell me these important storyline points? And it's funny because now that I'm reading the stories, I'm like, why would you spoil that for me? So I'm like talking out of both sides of my mouth here. And I honestly, genuinely...
you do talk a lot.
We've got 12 episodes full of it. And many more to come. Let me know. We always say let us know in the comments. Genuinely, I'm curious. Do you guys, which side of my mouth do you agree with? Do you think that it's better to not spoil, that Anguished Unmaking spoiled the entire story and you would have rather not known? Or if you aren't necessarily going to read the stories, or you know people who aren't going to read the stories, do they deserve to know that Anguished Unmaking happened to stop Avacyn? Does that make sense to you as needing those 5 story points? Because that was the direction that Wizards said that they wanted to go in, was they wanted to make story more important. They wanted to give Vorthos players, Vorthos Pride, they wanted to give Vorthos players more to care about. And they didn't have to go out and buy books or, have a collection of all these different stories.
They wanted to play to the market that was clearly there, and they were clearly just not playing to it.
Right. And so, they talked about it, and they decided that they wanted to do the 5 main story points. And I think they as well brought up the Elspeth thing. That people didn't know that Elspeth was dead unless they sought out the stories to read. Now that I am one of the people that sought out the stories to read, who knows, maybe at the time there were some Vorthos who were better Vorthos than me at the time, who were reading the stories, and they were like, how do people not know that Elspeth's dead? Yeah. I read it. How do you not know it? But at the same time, I'm sure that in the story made for a very shocking moment when you got to that point and Heliod kills Elspeth. Because I'm sure that was something that you did not see coming, because it was such a shock. So in this story, it would have been so much more of a shock, or at least there would have become a point where it would have tipped. It would have gone from, oh my God, Soren said I am your creator, and now she sees him for who he really is, so maybe he's going to save her. Maybe we'll still have good Avacyn again. And then it gets to that tipping point where Avacyn's like, no, I've done all of these wicked things. I've been awakened to the fact that I've killed innocent people. I've killed innocents. I've seen towns burning and mothers holding their dead children and things like that. And I did all of those things, and you were my creator. And so because you were my creator, it is your fault that I did those things. Because you gave me my mission and you made me go out and do those things. And so you have now been identified as the greatest evil on the plane of Innistrad. And as soon as she said that, and as soon as she realized that, his vision, or her vision of him, changed in her mind, and she was actually able to attack and hurt him, whereas before, when she saw him as her true creator, she was unable to do that. Until she realized, or tricked herself into feeling that he was wicked and that he deserved it. And that's incredible. first of all, again, just another amazing part of this story, because almost every part of the story was amazing, and I don't know that I can think of a single point where it got dull.
Well, I'll say it from my perspective. As he was reading, we were probably a quarter of the way through the story, which I felt was like nearing the end, but it was a quarter of the way through. It was a long story. Maybe a third.
It was a long story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just so you have perspective on the length of this story.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, okay, just kill her already. Like, this is taking too long. I don't need to hear all of these different phases of her madness. Like, just kill her already.
Which is hysterical because
as he kept reading, at one point I switched sides.
Not at one point. I don't know if you realize this. You said to me, all right, this is ridiculous, just kill her already.
Yeah.
And the next sentence was...
It was the next sentence.
It was literally the next sentence was, I plunged my spear into his neck and tore it, and he was bleeding and screaming, and you were like, all right, I take it back. Like, immediately. It was immediate. And I thought that was great because, again, that's really good storytelling.
Yeah.
You've gotten to a point where it may be getting repetitive or boring or slightly stale. And so what do? You stab Soren in the throat, and rip it. Like, that's incredible.
It really, like, and as he kept going, he says it was the next sentence, it was like each sentence built and built and built that much more that it became, okay, a second ago I wanted Avacyn dead, and it wasn't just I wanted her dead. I wanted her dead now. I wanted her dead yesterday, okay? And now, however many sentences later it was, I never wanted Avacyn to die.
Yeah.
I wanted Avacyn to be the narrator of every future story we ever read.
It was really good.
It was just so good.
It was really good. And you know what? I have to say, after she died, there was a short section that was narrated by someone else, or was said from someone else's perspective. And I couldn't quite tell whether it was Tamio or Soren. I'm almost certain it wasn't Jace, but it was either Tamio or Soren's perspective, possibly Soren's. And there was a definite tonal change, which they did very well throughout all 12 of these stories, but there was a tonal change, and it was a tonal change that I didn't like, just because of what Amy was saying.
Because the other part was just so good.
Yeah.
I mean, the language, the mood, just every component came together in such a beautiful way that when that line was there and the rest of the story happened, you were like, okay, I don't really care about the rest of this.
Yeah.
It was the end, so you had to read it, and it was important for you to know that information. But it wasn't until they started talking about the claws and the marble and everything that I got interested again in that section.
Not only that, but I thought that it was really funny that you started getting invested and you were like, oh, that's so cool. And then the next thing I read to you was, the Shadows over Innistrad story will continue again in 2 weeks on June 8th. And you were like, what?
I was like, what? I was so mad. I actually said, for those of you who are Walking Dead fans, which I'm very sorry, but I'm really kind of not.
I am. It's cool. It's
but
cool.
I did watch the finale. And, I did watch The Talking Dead after, where everyone was up in arms. But I said, what are you, the Walking Dead finale? Like, come on.
And it works. And I said to Amy, and I'll say to you guys as well, I don't know if you've... I can't state whether it was a convention where they were answering questions or whether it was an inside R&D where they talked about this, but one of the creators at Wizards, who works on the story, said that they want these stories to feel like weekly episodes. And I think they are. I mean, we are, I guess if you're getting meta, we are Talking Dead. We are talking about the stories after they've happened. So, and it's not directly after because, we're filming videos.
And this is Innistrad, so it's similar.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are zombies.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you've got that concept of discussing it after the fact, and it truly does feel like weekly episodes. You know,
Yeah.
Amy talked about before last week's episode, we mentioned how Amy had texted me and she was like, I can't wait to read the story.
Right.
Just like people would say, I can't wait for the new Game of Thrones, or I can't wait to see tonight's Walking Dead. It's the same thing, except it's actually text, which, you know, welcome to 2016. Not a lot of people read frequently, and especially as you get older, if you don't have to for school, there are a lot of people who are like, I don't read anymore. And yet, this is the Magic community. Maybe I'm incorrect. Maybe a lot of Magic fans do read, you know, and do enjoy reading books and things like that. I enjoy reading every once in a while. Is it frequent, or is it as much as I'd like it to be? No.
I enjoy when he reads and I just listen.
Which is stuff like this. So, you know, if you're an Amy kind of person, find a guy like me or a person like me and have them read the stories to you so you can...
There's no one like you.
Wow. People are gonna vomit. Hopefully you're not eating while watching this.
Hopefully you are.
But it gives you... Find someone like me to read you the story if you're like Amy, or if you're like me and you appreciate not only reading the story and absorbing it, but then also being able to talk it over with other people. You can find someone who maybe wants to hear the story but doesn't necessarily want to take the time to sit alone and read the story. So as we've mentioned this, I think we mentioned this in the last episode as well, find some friends, you know, do it while playing Magic, you know, play some games of Magic, and maybe somebody eats during a match, and then during the next match, or while other people are eating dinner or something, you read the story to everyone. And then everybody gets to talk about it afterwards, you know? And if it was boring, then you just go back to playing a game of Magic and you don't really talk about it. But if it wasn't boring, if it was like this one, you sit and you talk about it.
It will be worth it.
Oh, totally. Totally. So, this story was insane. I mentioned my negative points at the beginning, and I'm going to leave them over there because that's where they belong, because
the story was just so good.
And if you notice, all of my negative points...
I can't say enough good things about it, but at the same time, I can't say good things about it because whatever good things I would say they just, you know, pale in comparison because it was just so good.
Well, and because I think, because I came into this and I said I don't know what to say because my words wouldn't be better than the words in the story. They just don't. And I would consider myself to be an okay writer. I try to write every once in a while. I'm all right, but I'm not like that. I don't know that I could write like that. It was incredible. So, once again, as we kind of...
I would recommend that story to people, like I said in the beginning, who aren't even into Magic.
Yeah.
There are certain people who... you know, are really good writers or really love certain stories that I would recommend just to read that story.
Well,
just because I think they would like that story, even though they don't know who these characters are.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing is it's literally me just thinking back to it just now, so I could be wrong, but thinking back to the story itself, there weren't really a lot of callbacks.
No.
In other stories, we've been like, oh, and then they mentioned this, which happened in episode whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and
there was the Hell Vault, but...
They did talk about the Hell Vault, that's right. So it was my time trapped in the Hell Vault with demons and... Okay.
And I thought they were going to get more into that, and they didn't.
They mentioned it, I think, twice, because they mentioned it the first time where she said that...
Yeah, but they mentioned it. It was like a little nudge. It
wasn't
like...
Oh, yeah.
I thought they were going to make it a thing, and they didn't.
Well, Avacyn mentioned it with regard to Soren when he was being attacked by the angels, and she said he must feel like I felt in the Hell Vault when I was being attacked by the demons, or being held by the demons. And then at the end, she said, okay, whatever, just make me another silvery prison, and I'll get trapped in there again. And he was like, yeah, that's not how this works. And then killed her.
Right.
You know, and
it was so crazy.
She seemed, if possible, remorseful as she died. Which is interesting because he didn't necessarily... I don't know whether her madness went away right before she died, you know, but I'm not sure. I know that Soren didn't take it away, and I'm sure if he hadn't killed her, it's not like it would have just gone away and it would have been fine and he shouldn't have killed her. I'm sure it was because she was dying, she was given if this is what happened, she was given her sanity for but a moment before she died.
Yeah.
And she said that line that she said over and over, which I loved, which was, I am Avacyn, I am to protect, which was so cool. You know, it was so good. And then yet that one spot where it was like, but village burning, mother holding her dead children, did, you know what, not protect. You know, all of those flashes of all these terrible things that she did, incredible.
So good.
And again, just another awesome thing that happened, which
like I
doesn't
said,
even scratch the
I
surface.
found myself sitting there listening to this story going, I wish every story was like this.
Yeah. But I don't know that I do. It was awesome, and I would love more stories like this. I don't know that every story should be like this, because you do, to a degree, need a form of a setup.
Yeah.
And there was no setup in this story because it was pure finale. So you didn't need any, you know, the only setup actually would be the boring part that we were talking about at the end, where after Avacyn died, where it was like, and then more rumbling happened, and then more rumbling happened, and then Soren walked up the stairs.
To, you know, the episodes that come to follow
Yeah.
in 2 weeks.
Which again is the teaser to make you watch further.
It wasn't really a season, it was like a mid-season finale.
Right. Well, and it was maybe the thing. It actually makes perfect
it was like
sense.
a Christmas time finale.
Nice.
You know?
Or it was, if you want to make it akin to a movie, it was like the scene after the credits. It was like Nick Fury coming out at the end of Iron Man.
Right.
You know, because at the end, and this, I don't know how I feel about this. This may be a negative that I can talk about with this story. After Avacyn died, there were like 4 pictures that they showed us.
Yeah.
Which were cool pictures. From original Innistrad, and then they showed the picture of Geist of St. Traft with the art from the dual deck, I believe. But I don't know that I saw the point of that. Yeah. Like, if all of them were pictures of Avacyn, the 4th one was of the statue of Avacyn and people like holding up their weapons to her, kind of praying to her and worshiping her. That one made perfect sense to me. If the other 3 also related to Avacyn, even tangentially, which you could argue that they did because it was all Innistrad, but if it was all Avacyn related, that would make sense to me because they just killed off a main character. And so when you kill off a main character, you may want to show the different arts of that main character,
or kind of a shrine to her,
as a shrine to her, as an in memoriam. If somebody passes away, you see the in memoriams on
like
TV
they do
or whatever.
on Talking Dead.
Right, you know, the rest in peace thing. Like, that would have made sense to me, and in fact, I think is a brilliant idea. The pictures that were there, though, Holy Justiciar, Selfless Cathar, banners raised. I'm not going to remember all of them.
I think it was a way of showing, okay, now that Avacyn's dead, here's the direction that the world is going to go. Like, here's some of the stuff that's going to happen.
I don't think that's correct at all. Because I think that was all of the people while Avacyn was around. You had Selfless Cathars and Holy Justiciars holding up the symbol of Avacyn, burning away and melting away all the zombies. At the end of this story, they said, Jace especially was like, what have you done? What have you done to Soren? Because he took away Innistrad's only protector.
Exactly. That's why it's really important. That's why those other people, they're going to view Avacyn as like a martyr.
I don't know that Avacyn's magic would work like that. I don't know that holding up the symbol of Avacyn would melt zombies anymore if Avacyn's dead.
Oh, that's probably true.
I also don't know that the death of Avacyn snaps.
Well, I think that's then to show that, like, okay, these zombies are going to overtake now.
That's possible.
You know.
But what happens to the humans? What happens to all of these people? And do the people who have gone mad, such as people in the church, or people from the Gitrog monster, or the other angels like Bruna, do they come back? Do they snap back to reality, or is their madness just going to be like, all right, we have to now sweep up. We got rid of Avacyn, which was the big problem. Now we've got to deal with all these little problems that probably aren't so little. If an entire church is corrupt like that, like we saw in the Lunarch Inquisition story, and if there are still 2 crazy, strong angels running around, that may very well be a problem. That may very well be, something else that we're dealing with.
I won't say opposite way.
I won't say it's the only thing we're going to be dealing with, because that rumbling was not from the church or from, the Bruna, the 2 evil angels.
I see it the opposite way.
Okay.
Avacyn was the small thing that they had to take care of. And now she was like the levee. And the levee just burst.
Well, okay. And see, and the way I would see it...
And now the floodwaters are coming through.
Well, and the way I would see it is that, similar to that, is that, Avacyn was the only thing protecting this rumbling force from taking over. And this force had to corrupt her to force her to be dealt with.
To force its way through.
So that once she was dead, they could come back.
Yeah.
Could the rumbling be Ormondal? Maybe. Ormondal Profane Prince? It's possible. That's what we find out, that the rumbling is just Ormondal coming out of...
Eldritch Moon and Nahiri and...
Right, and the cryptoliths and all that stuff. So, we will see. I loved the story. If you haven't read it, do it. Please. Do it now. And it's not even to make Amy feel better. Because to be honest with you... I don't care. What'd you do? Because to be honest, you're missing out.
Yeah.
I've described some awesome things. Amy's described some awesome things. It hasn't been enough.
Even if you don't listen, and you don't read any of the other stories, like I said, it's important that you read this one just because it's so
It was incredible. And read it with other people. Like we've said, read it with... That's kind of my recommendation. From reading the stories with Amy, Amy and I have known each other for a while, so we know the kinds of things that each other likes, and we can have these discussions, but you might read this story with somebody and learn brand new things about them. Learn new things about how you think and how they think, and you can have discussions that, do they get heated? Probably not. I don't think you'd be arguing about stuff, but...
I was last week.
But, you were mad at Tamio, though. That's not... You weren't mad at me. You were mad at Tamio. So you can have discussions, and you can have kind of powwows and how you think about it. Your theories. We've asked you for your theories, but you can be making theories up with friends and stuff like that.
That's another thing that I thought was weird. When you heard, when Avacyn heard the thoughts or whatever, or what Tamio was saying. Okay. I thought it was odd, because I feel like last week she didn't care about any of this. Oh, because she was actually responding, you mean, to the words that Tamio was saying? Her pleas and everything. Something about something that she said made me go, that doesn't sound like her. Yeah. I can't remember what it is now. Yeah, it's possible. If you know what I'm talking about, leave it in the comments. Please. But anyway, guys, this has been episode 12 of JaAR. This has been the first episode of JaAR following our change to Geek for All. So welcome to Geek for All. As I've said, that video, that intro video hopefully was linked in a little annotation up top. But if not, you can find it on our channel. You should subscribe. There will be more JaAR episodes coming out. As Amy mentioned, let us know what you want us to do for the next 2 weeks. Yeah. Should we talk about the stories at length? Should we talk about them a little bit and then maybe talk about some stuff
He means the non-Shadows over Innistrad stories that they're going to post.
That are coming out for the next two weeks. It's until June 8th. But those interim stories about random areas of the multiverse, should we go super in-depth into them? Should we touch on them and then talk about other things in the magic world?
And maybe what we'll do is we'll read them and we'll see how they are and if they're good and interesting or play to, characters that we care about. Maybe we'll review them and then maybe we won't if they're terrible. I don't know.
I was going to say, maybe we'll review them on Jill and Amy Review. I was just waiting for you to say it.
If we read them and they're awful and boring and they were just filler, then maybe we won't
Well,
review
and then,
them per se.
or maybe we'll come on and say, this was awful, don't waste your time, and then talk about something else.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. As we said, let us know what you think. Subscribe, find out when videos like this come out, when more things come out. These videos, just because we went to Geek for All, and I said it in that video as well, just because we went to Geek for All doesn't mean these videos are going to change. We're just adding more and new and better and different things. So stay tuned for JaAR. We will be back. Just because Shadows over Innistrad is over does not mean this show is. We will be back with non-Shadows over Innistrad stuff, more Shadows over Innistrad stuff, into Eldritch Moon and beyond. So thank you guys for watching this. Thank you for watching any and all that you've watched. If you're Wizards of the Coast, thank you for what you do, because the story was fantastic. Again, if you're not Wizards of the Coast, thank you anyway. Go thank Wizards. And as we always say, first of all, I've been Joe.
I'm Amy.
And I am Avacyn. And I am to
And
protect.
I am to protect.
So, thank you guys so much for watching. And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.